why I long thought Maria Robotnik was an antagonist in the Sonic series, and why I was afraid of her for years. By Blazy Art. Hi. This title is a bit original, I admit. Weird. Sounds like a joke even. But the subject has been on my mind for a bit, and I finally found the courage to talk about it on the internet after several years of silence. Here's a testimony of an experience that traumatized me when I was younger, and which concerns a hacked GameCube memory card in the game Shadow the Hedgehog. Please don't laugh. Disclaimer, all this happened around 2005-2006. My memories are quite fuzzy and date back 20 years, so sorry in advance if I'm sometimes evasive. There's some things I prefer not to remember either. When I was younger, I was a huge Sonic fan. I discovered the franchise with Sonic X, Sonic R, Sonic Adventure 1, and Sonic Adventure 2. My mom was more than aware, since I kept telling her about my passion. One day, a garage sale was organized in my town, and my mother suggested that we go there to find games or goodies. I remember buying a sort of McDonald's Knuckles Tamagotchi, as well as a GameCube memory card on which a blue and red Sonic Mega Collection 49 sticker was badly stuck on it. Even at the time, I thought it smelled fishy, but the seller seemed to want to get rid of it given the price, and my mom wanted to give me a gift, so I took it. At worst, it was only a memory card. It's still practical. Context for those who never had a GameCube. A memory card alone, even one containing game saves, doesn't normally allow you to play them unless there's a disc inserted in the console. I can tell you that the younger me was happy when he discovered that I could actually play Sonic Mega Collection, aka a compilation of several classic Sonic games, on my console without the CD. Okay, the game was a little weird, but I told myself that it was normal since it seemed to be a pirated copy. A bit like burned discs back then, or R4s before their time. Plus, the internet was less democratized in 2005, and I didn't have access to it anyway, so I had no point of comparison. Finally, I simply didn't care. I was just happy to be able to play lots of Sonic games. So like I said, the compilation was weird. The most obvious thing was Sonic's appearance. His eyes were separated like for Tails. His pupils were gray. His fur was lighter. His shoes were white and red instead of red and white. And I think his arms were somehow too long. Maybe just an impression, though. Sometimes he had a red cross on his chest, but it wasn't recurrent. Again, I thought it was because it was a pirated copy. I had heard that these kinds of copies had bugs or visual modifications in Nintendo games, so I didn't find it confusing or weirder than that. Also, it was a compilation of old games with the old Sonic design, so it fit more with the chara of the time. Another visual detail. All the rings and the X is in the text were red. At first I thought it was a clue to unlock a hidden game, but even today, I have no idea. Most of the games were hard, sometimes buggy. Like it was impossible to get past Green Hill Zone in the first Sonic. When I tried to use the Chaos Emeralds in the other games, the game crashed. Knuckles, while gliding, was unmanageable. Tails in Sonic 2 seemed to avoid me. There are other bugs, but I don't remember very well. Again, I didn't know it was normal at the time. I had never played these games before. As for the difficulty, I thought it was the prerogative of retro gaming. A bit unrelated, but the music of Sonic Spinball was unbearable. It constantly played the same awful but somehow official OST. I learned that it was the music of the spinball options recently. Really unrelated, but I wanted to point it out. Finally, another thing that caught my attention was that sometimes during loading screens, messages were displayed. 2, to be precise. Play Shadow the Hedgehog to unlock exclusive content. And let me see the girl with an unfair demise. I only saw this message once. At the time, Shadow the Hedgehog was not released yet, so I naturally thought that it was necessary to insert Sonic Adventure 2 in addition to the memory card in the console. Result? My game was bugged. As soon as Maria or Sonic was on the screen, audio and visual freezes appeared. I was afraid for my copy of Sonic Adventure 2, and I was less of a fan of the so-called classic Sonic games, so I stopped putting this memory card in the console. 1 year later, Shadow the Hedgehog was announced for the GameCube. I had enjoyed Sonic Heroes back then and loved Sonic Adventure 2, so I was super excited to play this new journey focusing on Shadow, aka one of my new favorite characters at the time. For my kid self, the game had this edgy, cool, and mature vibe. Sonic was for grown-ups now. The ultimate life form is holding a gun. I remember having to go to great lengths to get my mom to buy me the game back then. Before I started it, for some reason, I remembered the message on my memory card. Play Shadow the Hedgehog to unlock exclusive content. This was probably the game the collection was talking about. That's what I told myself, so I put the memory card back in the console, hoping not to have any bad surprises like with Sonic Adventure 2. The game started with a cutscene. Some kind of ugly, giant alien, Black Doom, was talking to the Mega Collection Sonic. Their mouths were moving, but no sound was coming out. The two shook hands, then Sonic seemed to suddenly kill Black Doom before taking possession of his body, I think. Beyond finding it strange coming from the hedgehog, the cutscene had impressed me when I was younger, even if the scene itself wasn't graphic. There was no blood, and the possession looked like the cutscenes of Link wearing masks in Majora's. I tried to reassure myself by thinking that it was a mature game, and that I couldn't be a wimp when I hadn't even started playing. I also didn't want to prove my mother right. Again, this may seem silly to you, and maybe I was a dumb kid, but I didn't know the experience of other players. I was discovering the game, and I had no point of comparison. Moreover, I admit that when I was young, I was so afraid of what I had experienced with it, that I discovered the real cutscenes with the Snapcube fan dub years later. To come back to the game, after this literal jump scare, a message was displayed in white on a black background. I think it said, "New content available," after which the first level, Westopolis, started directly. Contrary to what was indicated in the ads explaining that, depending on your choices, you trace Shadow's story yourself, during my game, a specific objective was to be accomplished, and if I failed, I started again from the beginning. I admit I was a little disappointed, but false advertising exists. LOL. I arrived like that until the level The Doom, in which the cinematic of Maria's death starts, and here's what happens in the latter. Maria falls under the eyes of Shadow, who is then locked in a capsule. On the ground, she tells him that the universe of Earth depends on the hedgehog. Then her capsule is expelled into space. Shortly after, Black Doom, present on the Ark, grabs Maria's corpse by the head and takes possession of her by entering her mouth with a shrill scream. Once again, it was not bloody or whatever, but it was impressive even for low poly 3D and especially for a Sonic game. Okay, the Opus wanted to be darker and wanted to explore Shadow's backstory differently. But there, the cinematic was something. Then the game completely crashed. At the time, you won't be surprised to know that all this really scared me, even though I tried to rationalize it by thinking that it was maybe because of the buggy cartridge. It had already corrupted Nintendo games in the past, so I didn't think it was that far-fetched. I tried to restart the game by removing the memory card first. Anyway, the bonus content that I had never seen was already installed. But the console explicitly asked me to insert the memory card. It hadn't happened before, but then again I told myself that it was a thing of having to leave the bonus content inserted like for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I didn't have this game, so I didn't really know how it worked. I just knew the principle. I remember being annoyed when I restarted the disc, and even more so when I saw that I had lost all progress. Shadow 05 wasn't a very fun experience, frustrating even, and I was ready to give up. In doubt, however, I still restarted a game out of curiosity, and in the hope of not having lost all progress. First notable thing. No cutscene had played, and I found myself directly facing the title screen. After launching another save, something even more notable. Shadow was this time accompanied by Maria at the beginning of the game, which is normally impossible since she literally died 50 years ago in the lore, and no character now or later reacted or noticed her presence. Her name was displayed incorrectly. It was replaced by corrupted memory. Her 3D model was slightly different. She seemed paler, there was blood on the corner of her mouth and her left eye. She wore long blue sleeves like in Sonic Adventure 2, and finally a red cross was present on her torso, as if to emulate the place where she had been shot. More disturbing thing, unlike the other characters, she was dubbed in my native language. I'm not English. While the game had never been localized in this language, even less at the time. Even more disturbing, she spoke directly to me, not to Shadow. She knew my first name and responded to what I said behind my screen. At first it was confusing, even scary, but she reassured me. It was part of the additional content, a new tutorial function that acted in real time, created by Sega to guide lost players. The company liked gadgets ahead of their time. You should have seen the power of the Mega Drive and the beginnings of the discs used with the Mega CD, she said. To be honest, this rather corny justification had convinced me. Even better, I was reassured to have her by my side. Until then, the gaming experience was unpleasant, sometimes scary, and even if there was blood on Maria's sprite, she was nice. She's a nice character in Sonic. Plus, I played Shadow, so theoretically no reason to panic. She asked me to complete the objectives, encouraged me, and reassured me when I lost a mission. Then we started talking about more personal things. Like, I told her about my days, my toys, etc. I remember her favorite color, blue. To be honest, I didn't have a lot of friends at school back then, and even fewer friends who shared my love for Sonic, especially during the GameCube era when the PlayStation versus Xbox console war was in full swing. Coming home after school and chatting with Maria was nice. Sometimes it was even the best time of the day. My mom even commented that I must be so invested to talk to my screen so much. I even dared to turn on the console secretly at impossible hours, just to talk to Maria, without necessarily playing, because I was afraid that everything would stop after I finished the game. One day, as usual, I turned on my GameCube and started to play the level, the Doom. Put down my controller and chatted with Maria. She confessed to me the reason for her return after the first save. Black Doom had taken possession of her, and she was in constant pain. The alien was controlling her body and mind more and more over time, and the only solution to this problem was to have a gateway to go to the real world. She asked me to kill myself to help her. This scared me so much I immediately turned off my console. I couldn't sleep that night. I turned my GameCube back on the next day to clarify everything, hoping there was a misunderstanding or that I had misunderstood her request. As soon as I saw her, she immediately apologized for her words, but justified them by saying things like, "I like the sky, but I'm condemned to see it as black, while blue is my favorite color. My dream was to one day live on Earth. You must know that." Once she even said that one day she heard my mother cooking gratin, and she wondered what it tasted like. At first it was still bearable. She suggested to swap places from time to time. I ignored her, pretending I was focused on the game, but the further I got in the story, the more she was silent, curt, even mean, as if she was sulking at me. Then she reproached me for my cowardice and said she was suffering. Her anger was manifested by the volume of the TV, which increased by itself. My mom reprimanded me quite a bit at the time because of that. Pauses at the worst moments of the game to make me rage. My controller, which overheated to the point of burning my hands. Flashing and/or subliminal images, jump scares. Afterwards, she apologized. Said she was not herself, that she was in pain. She begged me to kill myself to make her live. It was atrocious. I wanted to stop playing, but my console started turning on by itself, whether there was a game inside or not. The situation was terrifying. I had sleepless nights. The lack of rest also caused me my first sleep paralysis, as well as my first anxiety attacks. And I couldn't even get up to go to school because I was afraid that Maria would be there too, somehow. She's about my age. What if she knew my school? She already knows where I live and can turn on my TV whenever she wants. I didn't dare talk about it to anyone, for fear of being thought of as crazy or an idiot who was making things up. The situation had to stop, but I was also afraid of killing Maria. Maybe finishing the game would save her. After all, she was a martyr. She suffered too, and often apologized after her excesses. I finally took my courage in both hands and I went to the final boss. The boss looked like a vaguely anthropomorphic flying abomination with a giant orange eye instead of legs. I learned later that it was the form of Devil Doom once again thinks Snapcube, with as a head the fleshy body of Maria, whose arms were replaced by wings similar to those of Shadow in Shadow Generations, but pinkish and bluish in color. The arms of I would say the main body, as for them, resembled those of Sonic. I had forgotten that guy. He also had a tail and flesh quills similar to those of the blue hedgehog on his back. Finally, a huge red cross was in the center of the monster. The fight OST was blaring and played on a loop of about 4 seconds, and Maria's pleas layered over it were painful to hear. She was a literal child screaming and begging in agony. I tried turning the volume down, but it didn't work. She was screaming and sobbing even louder. Things like, "Please, it hurts so bad. Please make it stop. Kill yourself. Please." I wanted to beat the boss to end this at first, but I was quickly overwhelmed by fear, so I just curled up in a ball and cried, hoping the Super Shadow's ring timer would reach 0, but even after that, the boss fight lasted for about 4 minutes before the console crashed again. It took me a while to restart the game. I was horrified to find that my save had been erased once again. And Maria was still there, silently crying, begging me to die for her. Maybe the nightmare would have ended if I had beaten that damn boss. For now, I was too scared to start from scratch. I never touched that game or my memory card again after that. To distract myself, I once launched Sonic Adventure 2, but when I saw that Maria had taken over my save file too, talking through it while being a playable character in Chaos Garden, I immediately turned it off. I secretly threw away all my Sonic games and my GameCube. After that, I didn't play a Sonic game again until Frontiers. I was traumatized by this experience, of course, so much so that I dissociated myself from the license, even though I was literally a fan at the time. For me, Sega had gone too far. The game was scary and disrespectful. When I really discovered what Shadow the Hedgehog was for real via internet memes and the resurgence of the franchise, I looked into it to understand that what I had experienced was not normal. That's why I'm talking about it here. I also hope to find someone with the same experience as me to, relate. To be honest, I'm pretty weak, psychologically. Even when I was young, I was a pretty sensitive person, but I think this experience didn't help. I suffer from insomnia, rather recurrent sleep paralysis, and depression. I'm treating myself, no worries. I don't think these symptoms are exclusively due to Maria and these haunted, bugged games. But sometimes there are nights when I think about it. I blame myself for not having killed myself for her when she was suffering. But on the other hand, I was just a kid. I also admit that I've always had trouble with Sonic.exe and Tails Doll for these reasons. The .exe reminding me of the strange Sonic from my GameCube, even if they are only stories. Well, I hope so, given what happened to me. Anyway, thanks for reading my slightly stupid testimony. I'm glad to still be alive to talk about it. Nowadays, I've made peace with Maria's character a bit, thanks to Shadow Generations. Why I long thought Maria Robotnik was an antagonist in the Sonic series, and why I was afraid of her for years. By Blazy Art. Hi. This title is a bit original, I admit. Weird. Sounds like a joke even. But the subject has been on my mind for a bit, and I finally found the courage to talk about it on the internet after several years of silence. Here's a testimony of an experience that traumatized me when I was younger, and which concerns a hacked GameCube memory card in the game Shadow the Hedgehog. Please don't laugh. Disclaimer, all this happened around 2005-2006. My memories are quite fuzzy and date back 20 years, so sorry in advance if I'm sometimes evasive. There are some things I prefer not to remember either. When I was younger, I was a huge Sonic fan. I discovered the franchise with Sonic X, Sonic R, Sonic Adventure 1, and Sonic Adventure 2. My mom was more than aware, since I kept telling her about my passion. One day, a garage sale was organized in my town, and my mother suggested that we go there to find games or goodies. I remember buying a sort of McDonald's Knuckles Tamagotchi, as well as a GameCube memory card on which a blue and red Sonic Mega Collection 49 sticker was badly stuck on it. Even at the time, I thought it smelled fishy, but the seller seemed to want to get rid of it given the price, and my mom wanted to give me a gift, so I took it. At worst, it was only a memory card. It's still practical. Context for those who never had a GameCube. A memory card alone, even one containing game saves, doesn't normally allow you to play them unless there's a disc inserted in the console. I can tell you that the younger me was happy when he discovered that I could actually play Sonic Mega Collection, aka a compilation of several classic Sonic games, on my console without the CD. Okay, the game was a little weird, but I told myself that it was normal since it seemed to be a pirated copy. A bit like burned discs back then, or R4s before their time. Plus, the internet was less democratized in 2005, and I didn't have access to it anyway, so I had no point of comparison. Finally, I simply didn't care. I was just happy to be able to play lots of Sonic games. So like I said, the compilation was weird. The most obvious thing was Sonic's appearance. His eyes were separated like for Tails. His pupils were gray. His fur was lighter. His shoes were white and red instead of red and white. And I think his arms were somehow too long. Maybe just an impression, though. Sometimes he had a red cross on his chest, but it wasn't recurrent. Again, I thought it was because it was a pirated copy. I had heard that these kinds of copies had bugs or visual modifications in Nintendo games, so I didn't find it confusing or weirder than that. Also, it was a compilation of old games with the old Sonic design, so it fit more with the chara of the time. Another visual detail. All the rings and the X's in the text were red. At first I thought it was a clue to unlock a hidden game, but even today, I have no idea. Most of the games were hard, sometimes buggy. Like it was impossible to get past Green Hill Zone in the first Sonic. When I tried to use the Chaos Emeralds in the other games, the game crashed. Knuckles, while gliding, was unmanageable. Tails in Sonic 2 seemed to avoid me. There are other bugs, but I don't remember very well. Again, I didn't know it was normal at the time. I had never played these games before. As for the difficulty, I thought it was the prerogative of retro gaming. A bit unrelated, but the music of Sonic Spinball was unbearable. It constantly played the same awful, but somehow official OST. I learned that it was the music of the Spinball options recently. Really unrelated, but I wanted to point it out. Finally, another thing that caught my attention was that sometimes during loading screens, messages were displayed. 2, to be precise. Play Shadow the Hedgehog to unlock exclusive content. And let me see the girl with an unfair demise. I only saw this message once. At the time, Shadow the Hedgehog was not released yet, so I naturally thought that it was necessary to insert Sonic Adventure 2 in addition to the memory card in the console. Result? My game was bugged. As soon as Maria or Sonic was on the screen, audio and visual freezes appeared. I was afraid for my copy of Sonic Adventure 2, and I was less of a fan of the so-called classic Sonic games, so I stopped putting this memory card in the console. 1 year later, Shadow the Hedgehog was announced for the GameCube. I had enjoyed Sonic Heroes back then and loved Sonic Adventure 2, so I was super excited to play this new journey focusing on Shadow, aka one of my new favorite characters at the time. For my kid self, the game had this edgy, cool, and mature vibe. Sonic was for grown-ups now. The ultimate life form is holding a gun. I remember having to go to great lengths to get my mom to buy me the game back then. Before I started it, for some reason, I remembered the message on my memory card. Play Shadow the Hedgehog to unlock exclusive content. This was probably the game the collection was talking about. That's what I told myself, so I put the memory card back in the console, hoping not to have any bad surprises like with Sonic Adventure 2. The game started with a cutscene. Some kind of ugly, giant alien, Black Doom, was talking to the Mega Collection Sonic. Their mouths were moving, but no sound was coming out. The two shook hands, then Sonic seemed to suddenly kill Black Doom before taking possession of his body, I think. Beyond finding it strange coming from the hedgehog, the cutscene had impressed me when I was younger, even if the scene itself wasn't graphic. There was no blood, and the possession looked like the cutscenes of Link wearing masks in Majora's. I tried to reassure myself by thinking that it was a mature game, and that I couldn't be a wimp when I hadn't even started playing. I also didn't want to prove my mother right. Again, this may seem silly to you, and maybe I was a dumb kid, but I didn't know the experience of other players. I was discovering the game, and I had no point of comparison. Moreover, I admit that when I was young, I was so afraid of what I had experienced with it, that I discovered the real cutscenes with the Snapcube fan dub years later. To come back to the game, after this literal jump scare, a message was displayed in white on a black background. I think it said, "New content available," after which the first level, Westopolis, started directly. Contrary to what was indicated in the ads explaining that, depending on your choices, you trace Shadow's story yourself, during my game, a specific objective was to be accomplished, and if I failed, I started again from the beginning. I admit I was a little disappointed, but false advertising exists. LOL. I arrived like that until the level, the Doom. in which the cinematic of Maria's death starts. And here's what happens in the latter. Maria falls under the eyes of Shadow, who is then locked in a capsule. On the ground, she tells him that the universe of Earth depends on the hedgehog. Then her capsule is expelled into space. Shortly after, Black Doom, present on the Ark, grabs Maria's corpse by the head and takes possession of her by entering her mouth with a shrill scream. Once again, it was not bloody or whatever, but it was impressive even for low poly 3D and especially for a Sonic game. Okay, the Opus wanted to be darker and wanted to explore Shadow's backstory differently. But there, the cinematic was something. Then the game completely crashed. At the time, you won't be surprised to know that all this really scared me, even though I tried to rationalize it by thinking that it was maybe because of the buggy cartridge. It had already corrupted Nintendo games in the past, so I didn't think it was that far-fetched. I tried to restart the game by removing the memory card first. Anyway, the bonus content that I had never seen was already installed. But the console explicitly asked me to insert the memory card. It hadn't happened before, but then again I told myself that it was a thing of having to leave the bonus content inserted like for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I didn't have this game, so I didn't really know how it worked. I just knew the principle. I remember being annoyed when I restarted the disc, and even more so when I saw that I had lost all progress. Shadow 05 wasn't a very fun experience, frustrating even, and I was ready to give up. In doubt, however, I still restarted a game out of curiosity, and in the hope of not having lost all progress. First notable thing. No cutscene had played, and I found myself directly facing the title screen. After launching another save, something even more notable. Shadow was this time accompanied by Maria at the beginning of the game, which is normally impossible since she literally died 50 years ago in the lore, and no character now or later reacted or noticed her presence. Her name was displayed incorrectly. It was replaced by corrupted memory. Her 3D model was slightly different. She seemed paler. There was blood on the corner of her mouth and her left eye. She wore long blue sleeves like in Sonic Adventure 2. And finally, a red cross was present on her torso, as if to emulate the place where she had been shot. More disturbing thing, unlike the other characters, she was dubbed in my native language. I'm not English. While the game had never been localized in this language, even less at the time. Even more disturbing, she spoke directly to me, not to Shadow. She knew my first name and responded to what I said behind my screen. At first it was confusing, even scary, but she reassured me. It was part of the additional content, a new tutorial function that acted in real time, created by Sega to guide lost players. The company liked gadgets ahead of their time. You should have seen the power of the Mega Drive and the beginnings of the discs used with the Mega CD, she said. To be honest, this rather corny justification had convinced me. Even better, I was reassured to have her by my side. Until then, the gaming experience was unpleasant, sometimes scary, and even if there was blood on Maria's sprite, she was nice. She's a nice character in Sonic. Plus, I played Shadow, so theoretically no reason to panic. She asked me to complete the objectives, encouraged me, and reassured me when I lost a mission. Then we started talking about more personal things. Like, I told her about my days, my toys, etc. I remember her favorite color, blue. To be honest, I didn't have a lot of friends at school back then, and even fewer friends who shared my love for Sonic, especially during the GameCube era when the PlayStation versus Xbox console war was in full swing. Coming home after school and chatting with Maria was nice. Sometimes it was even the best time of the day. My mom even commented that I must be so invested to talk to my screen so much. I even dared to turn on the console secretly at impossible hours, just to talk to Maria, without necessarily playing, because I was afraid that everything would stop after I finished the game. One day, as usual, I turned on my GameCube and started to play the level, the Doom. Put down my controller and chatted with Maria. She confessed to me the reason for her return after the first save. Black Doom had taken possession of her, and she was in constant pain. The alien was controlling her body and mind more and more over time, and the only solution to this problem was to have a gateway to go to the real world. She asked me to kill myself to help her. This scared me so much I immediately turned off my console. I couldn't sleep that night. I turned my GameCube back on the next day to clarify everything, hoping there was a misunderstanding or that I had misunderstood her request. As soon as I saw her, she immediately apologized for her words, but justified them by saying things like, "I like the sky, but I'm condemned to see it as black, while blue is my favorite color. My dream was to one day live on Earth. You must know that." Once she even said that one day she heard my mother cooking gratin, and she wondered what it tasted like. At first it was still bearable. She suggested to swap places from time to time. I ignored her, pretending I was focused on the game, but the further I got in the story, the more she was silent, curt, even mean, as if she was sulking at me. Then she reproached me for my cowardice and said she was suffering. Her anger was manifested by the volume of the TV, which increased by itself. My mom reprimanded me quite a bit at the time because of that. Pauses at the worst moments of the game to make me rage. My controller, which overheated to the point of burning my hands. Flashing and/or subliminal images, jump scares. Afterwards, she apologized. Said she was not herself, that she was in pain. She begged me to kill myself to make her live. It was atrocious. I wanted to stop playing, but my console started turning on by itself, whether there was a game inside or not. The situation was terrifying. I had sleepless nights. The lack of rest also caused me my first sleep paralysis, as well as my first anxiety attacks. And I couldn't even get up to go to school because I was afraid that Maria would be there too, somehow. She's about my age. What if she knew my school? She already knows where I live and can turn on my TV whenever she wants. I didn't dare talk about it to anyone, for fear of being thought of as crazy or an idiot who was making things up. The situation had to stop, but I was also afraid of killing Maria. Maybe finishing the game would save her. After all, she was a martyr. She suffered too, and often apologized after her excesses. I finally took my courage in both hands and I went to the final boss. The boss looked like a vaguely anthropomorphic flying abomination with a giant orange eye instead of legs. I learned later that it was the form of Devil Doom, once again thinks Snapcube, with as a head the fleshy body of Maria, whose arms were replaced by wings similar to those of Shadow in Shadow Generations, but pinkish and bluish in color. The arms of I would say the main body, as for them, resembled those of Sonic. I had forgotten that guy. He also had a tail and flesh quills similar to those of the blue hedgehog on his back. Finally, a huge red cross was in the center of the monster. The fight OST was blaring and played on a loop of about 4 seconds, and Maria's pleas layered over it were painful to hear. She was a literal child screaming and begging in agony. I tried turning the volume down, but it didn't work. She was screaming and sobbing even louder. Things like, "Please, it hurts so bad. Please make it stop. Kill yourself. Please." I wanted to beat the boss to end this at first, but I was quickly overwhelmed by fear, so I just curled up in a ball and cried, hoping the Super Shadow's ring timer would reach 0, but even after that, the boss fight lasted for about 4 minutes before the console crashed again. It took me a while to restart the game. I was horrified to find that my save had been erased once again. And Maria was still there, silently crying, begging me to die for her. Maybe the nightmare would have ended if I had beaten that damn boss. For now, I was too scared to start from scratch. I never touched that game or my memory card again after that. To distract myself, I once launched Sonic Adventure 2, but when I saw that Maria had taken over my save file too, talking through it while being a playable character in Chaos Garden, I immediately turned it off. I secretly threw away all my Sonic games and my GameCube. After that, I didn't play a Sonic game again until Frontiers. I was traumatized by this experience, of course, so much so that I dissociated myself from the license, even though I was literally a fan at the time. For me, Sega had gone too far. The game was scary and disrespectful. When I really discovered what Shadow the Hedgehog was for real via internet memes and the resurgence of the franchise, I looked into it to understand that what I had experienced was not normal. That's why I'm talking about it here. I also hope to find someone with the same experience as me to, relate. To be honest, I'm pretty weak, psychologically. Even when I was young, I was a pretty sensitive person, but I think this experience didn't help. I suffer from insomnia, rather recurrent sleep paralysis, and depression. I'm treating myself, no worries. I don't think these symptoms are exclusively due to Maria and these haunted, bugged games. But sometimes there are nights when I think about it. I blame myself for not having killed myself for her when she was suffering. But on the other hand, I was just a kid. I also admit that I've always had trouble with Sonic.exe and Tails Doll for these reasons. The .exe reminding me of the strange Sonic from my GameCube, even if they are only stories. Well, I hope so, given what happened to me. Anyway, thanks for reading my slightly stupid testimony. I'm glad to still be alive to talk about it. Nowadays, I've made peace with Maria's character a bit, thanks to Shadow Generations. We built a 4-dimensional house. Shouldn't have walked on the roof. By Rowan Redfang, and welcome to Creepypasta. Architects are artists who tell space how to behave. We are taught from day one to respect the ground. We spend our lives fighting stress and begging gravity to let our work stand. Dahlia and I instead spent the last decade figuring out how to insult all of that. Because for thousands of years, humanity had been unaware that they were only building on the surface of the universe. The mountain wind bit through my coat with the scent of electric fumes and pine trees. I stood at the edge of the concrete platform behind a blast-resistant glass shield. The clearing around us was a crater we had ripped out of the forest, made of dirt and gravel, hidden between the Alps. General Hansen's squad had butchered over 40 acres of ancient pine to clear the perimeter. Dahlia stood beside me, her fingers tapping on her tablet. It glowed across her face and highlighted the exhaustion under her eyes. She hadn't slept in almost 48 hours, and neither had I. We didn't need coffee. Adrenaline running through our veins made even the cold wind irrelevant. I couldn't take my eyes off our life's work, what we had sacrificed our 30s for. Swimming through the pre-dawn mist on the concrete foundation was our monument to insanity. 8 individual cubes, each measuring 40 feet across, made from high-density polymers, tungsten, and steel. 4 of them were stacked vertically into a tower. The remaining 4 extended outwards from the 3rd floor, branching in all 4 directions, like a cross, or what it actually was, an unwrapped tesseract. The structure offended the natural landscape of the mountain. All around it was my wife Dahlia's contribution to my genius. The GFA, Gravitational Folder Array. A ring of 12 superconducting pillars, black towers connected by cables filled with liquid helium to prevent overheating. And all those armed soldiers surrounding the structure were completely unaware that their rifles would be useless against mathematics. They kept shifting their weights in the cold. Pressure across the primary nodes is stabilizing. Generators are at a maximum capacity, Dahlia said, with that melody in her voice, like every time the numbers finally made sense. She tucked a lock of her dark hair behind her ear. She went on. We need the structural integrity to hold, Johann. The GFA is going to peak at almost 400 G inside the ring. If it buckles under the pressure, we're going to create a localized micro-black hole instead of folding the building. My work is fine, Dahlia, I said. I made sure to over-engineer the load by a factor of 5. I couldn't help but grin as I traced the lines of the building against the rising sun. We're about to force the universe to accept our new reality. A Nobel Prize awaits you, and the Pritzker for me. I chuckled. They'll have to invent new categories of awards after this. The gravel behind us crunched under heavy boots approaching. General Hansen stepped into the light, flanked by 2 soldiers and their rifles. He wore a parka over his uniform, exhaling clouds with each breath. From the look on his bearded face, I could tell he considered joy to be a tactical disadvantage. I couldn't remember ever seeing him smile. "Aren't you planning your award ceremonies too early, Dr. Johann?" he said, with that thick German accent. "We've been freezing here for weeks now. I'm looking at 8 very expensive plastic boxes. Tell me you're not going to actually crush them. Explain to me again what we're buying before I choose to freeze the money instead of my men." I turned, ready to fend off his skepticism. To think that Dahlia and I were the only people in the world who understood the punchline to the greatest joke ever told to science. "Imagine you take a cardboard box and put it in a hydraulic press," I said, gesturing at the structure. "What happens?" "You flatten the box," the general said. "Indeed, it doesn't disappear. All the material is still there, just folded into a lower dimension. It becomes a square, from a 3D object to a 2D. I understand how a trash compactor works, Doctor, and I don't like the thought of flattening 50 million euros of NATO funding." "We're not crushing anything," I said, unable to keep that electric excitement out of my voice. I was shaking. "We just compress a dimension. According to our calculations, the other 7 cubes will compress into the exact same coordinates as the first one without intersecting. They will overlap quantum mechanically." "It's topology," Dahlia intervened. Her voice was the perfect counter to mine, calm and precise. "The GFA generates a localized gravity well, so intense it will bend spatial dimensions inwards. It will project the building into a higher dimensional space and leave only a 3D cross-section behind." Hansen took a sip from his thermos, shifting his gaze up to my beautiful building. "So, like a pocket dimension? You're telling me you can fit an entire base inside a closet?" "Yes, kind of," I said, clapping once and pointing a finger at him. "Imagine infinite space on a finite plot of land. It will revolutionize urban planning, architecture, and..." "Storage," Hansen interrupted me. "Deployment. A bunker that can't be hit by missiles because the interior doesn't exist outside it." "Do it then, Doctor. Let's see where our money went." Dahlia and I exchanged looks. A decade had passed. A decade of failed grants and scientific mockery, of sleepless nights and broken prototypes, all conveyed between us in a single glance. She nodded and tapped a sequence on her tablet. We all put our earmuffs on. Our hands joined together on the safety switch mounted on the side of the console. Then we turned the key and pressed the interface. The earth shook when the GFA screamed like a giant beast. Its engines rumbled as massive amounts of power were released into the pillars, more than what could power an entire city. The air pressure dropped quickly and made our ears ring. A frequency followed that hit my chest and made my bones rattle and my teeth ache. The reaction assaulted our biology rather than our eyes. There was no flash of light or laser beams. It all happened just like in our simulation. The space between the pillars boiled, and the air turned into a violent but warm storm that melted the snow around them. I couldn't take my eyes off the building. Lights bent all around it, following geometric arcs that were impossible to predict. Gravitational lensing. That was the name. like the light of a star passing behind a black hole. Even space itself warped, behaving like air above a jet plane. Gravity was pulling it inwards. All the steel stretched into a translucent distortion, slowly bleeding into the cube beneath. I tasted blood in my mouth, but I ignored it. We knew it would happen. Completely mesmerized, I watched the solid matter fold onto itself. The 4 cubes flanking the 3rd floor collapsed inwards through the center, drawn by the crushing gravity. The architecture was literally recalculating itself, folding angles that our brain could never process. And behind the building, the sky appeared to fracture into thousands of shapes, turning the visual into an ever-shifting mosaic of static. Geometry was melting, liquefying and sliding through the metal. We stared at the matter collapsing towards the central point, but at the same time remaining in the same place. The absurdity of the view made my stomach turn. I gagged, but forced my eyes to stay open. The scream reached its peak with a vibration that almost shattered the glass. With a shock wave of air that slammed dirt and leaves across it, the noise vanished. A perfect silence fell onto the entire mountain. When the ringing in my ears faded, I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead, and just then I noticed my nose was bleeding. Dahlia also had a thin line of blood on her lips, and so did Hansen and his soldiers. They moaned, holding their temples. I raised my gaze and looked past the cracked glass. The mist had disappeared, and not just that. "My God," I whispered. My towering cross of 8 cubes was gone. In the center of the concrete platform, in the ring of black pillars, sat a single cube. Just the ground floor. Hansen stepped forward with a face of shock that spoke for itself. "What happened?" he yelled. "Where's the rest of it? Did it disintegrate? You told me you were going to compress it, Doctor. Did you just destroy years of work?" I ignored him and stared, my palms and face pressing against the glass. "Dahlia, the telemetry?" "It's stable," she said, out of breath. Her fingers tapped across the tablet. "It's there. The mass readings on the platform haven't changed at all. It's still supporting the same weight as before. The spatial overlapping is holding. The W-axis compression is at 100%. She smiled at me, and so did I. The hypervolume folded successfully. "It worked," I said, trying to catch my breath. "It's all inside." Dahlia slammed into me. My legs were giving out, but my hands, still shaking, wrapped around her coat and held her tight. I buried my face into her shoulder with tears wetting the fabric. We hugged, ignoring the soldiers and the freezing wind returning. Like 2 people who'd spent the last 10 years digging a tunnel out of a prison, and finally found freedom. "Where did the other floors go?" the general asked. "It's all there," I said. "We just can't see the other 7 rooms because our eyes are locked into 3 dimensions. We're just looking at a single face of it." "Radiation levels are negligible," Dahlia reported, her eyes darting between her tablet and the single cube. "Gravity is normalized. Atmosphere is standard." We walked across the dirt towards the perimeter of the platform. Hansen followed us, flanked by his soldiers, their faces paled in confusion. From that angle, the cube looked completely normal. Just a gray box of brutalist architecture with a door on the front and windows on the sides. "So?" the general said with a gesture towards the cube. "Can we walk inside?" "Not yet," I answered. I was about to continue when I took a few steps to the right to get a better angle of the structure. And the magic happened. As my perspective shifted, the cube reacted. It moved. The front face containing the door contracted inwards and flattened into a sheet of light. At the same time, the left wall unfolded outwards to replace it. The door became a ghostly image that lingered for a second before bleeding and vanishing. It slid back into the center and became translucent, while a blank panel folded out from the opposite side. I stopped dead and watched in awe. "My God," the general said. "What the hell is that?" one of the soldiers yelled, aiming his rifle at the cube. "Do not shoot!" we both screamed. Hansen drew his own rifle, taking a step back. "Dr. Johann, the building is moving. You said it was stable. Why is it tracking us?" I could hear both Dahlia's heart and mine hammering in the silence. I sidestepped to the right, and the cube reacted instantly. The wall retracted into an impossible center, and the face with the door came back, pulled from the interior to face me again. Its motions were so fluid and sickening to watch. "It's not moving, and it's not tracking us," I said, taking ragged breaths. The knowledge hit me with massive force. "Nothing is alive, General. It's just the projection." "Speak English, Doctor," Hansen said without lowering his weapon. "He's right." Dahlia stepped in front of him. "Think of a normal 3D cube. If you look straight at it, you only see one face, a square. But if you walk around it, you see the other faces. What we're looking at is no longer a cube. This is a tesseract, a 4D hypercube. It possesses 8 cubical faces, but because it's now existing in a 3D space, it has to rotate its hypervolume to maintain continuity in our field of vision. It's not moving. Our movements are forcing its projection to recalculate. We can only perceive one cross-section at a time. "Send the drone in," Hansen ordered. "Nobody is stepping inside a building that can't decide what shape it is." A soldier carried a large drone. He set it on the concrete and stepped back. The front door of the cube could be opened via remote control. Dahlia tapped on her tablet and, with an echoing screech, the door swung open. Inside, the lights were on. The interior looked just like before. Sterile walls and a table bolted to the floor. In the corner, the staircase leading to the second floor. The drone rolled on the concrete and crossed the threshold of the cube. We all gathered around the monitor of the soldier handling it. The camera feed showed a perfectly normal view. The lighting was fine. The table showed no visible changes. "Upstairs," I said, as we all stared in silence. "Make it proceed upstairs." The soldier nodded. The drone rolled towards the staircase and raised its mechanical legs to begin a slow climb. None of us dared make a sound. We stopped breathing as the images appeared on the monitor. The drone reached the top of the stairs and rolled onto the second floor. "I don't understand," Hansen said. He pointed a finger at the screen. The drone is going up, but there's no second floor there. Where is it going? Because it worked. The internal volume is maintained. The second floor exists within the folded dimension, Dahlia replied. He didn't answer. The drone reached the second floor, transmitting footage of the room and its pristine walls and window. Hansen was no longer looking at the monitor. I followed his gaze. So did Dahlia, her face paling. Hovering over the cube, directly above the center, was the drone. Instead of flying, it stood there, existing in a space that our eyes couldn't understand. Its shape stretched and twisted to infinity like a graphic glitch. It folded open, showing the internal wiring and circuits, all the gears and treads, the camera lens, everything occupying the same visual plane. We were looking at an autopsy of a robot floating above the cube. But the monitor still showed the images from the inside without issues. As it moved, the metal skeleton kept distorting into long spikes and snapping back into a cluster made of all its components. Inside the building, it was still navigating the second floor intact. It's moving through the W axis, I whispered. It's not broken, we're just seeing the light escaping the folding. That's its cross-section passing through our dimension. That's fascinating. The view was horrifying, but it was also the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. We'd done it. General, prepare the suits, I said. We're going in. 2 of the last 10 years went into designing those, just for this moment. Thick shells over a flexible membrane, with an exterior of layered polymer that caught the sunlight. The helmet sealed at the neck with a pressurized collar. The 4 security locks clicked, one at a time. We looked like something between deep-sea divers and astronaut. Dr. Johann, you want me to put this on while my men are securing the perimeter in winter clothes? Hansen said, pulling at the gloves of his suit. This feels a bit excessive. If you prefer to walk in without one, Dahlia intervened. Be our guest, General. You said the building is stable. Indeed it is, I said, working the zipper on my torso. But we're not. Our bodies are still 3D. That stops being trivial when we cross that. I pointed towards the cube. The GFA compressed the volume across a W axis that we don't possess a sensory organ for. If we walk in there without protection, every cell in our bodies will be trying to occupy the same coordinates as themselves. Our organs would unfold outside of them. The general didn't answer. Dahlia finished the explanation. The suits enforce boundary conditions. They keep our body's location consistent. In short, they will tell the universe that we are still 3-dimensional in a very angry way. Hansen grunted, looking unhappy with the explanation, but he put on the helmet. The suits were wired, 4 cameras each, 1 in each direction, and microphones. The soldiers outside would have a live feed, or so we thought. Dahlia had done the math on what happened to electromagnetic signals when they crossed a dimensional edge, but we chose not to share that with the general yet. He grabbed his rifle and led the way. We crossed the platform. 3 people who had run out of things to say. The cube sat there in the center of the ring of pillars, like something people would worship. A puzzle waiting to be solved, or a warning begging to be heard. The mist had cleared, leaving behind a sky too blue and clear, like the world itself wanted to observe. Hansen walked in first, raising the rifle to shoulder height. To greet us was the most normal banality, just as all the times we'd gone in before. The walls, the table. On the opposite side, a window showed the mountains and the line of pines. The sunlight came from the distance and formed a yellow glowing square on the floor. Nothing told us we were navigating a hyper-volume. "Smells like a construction site," Hansen said. Dahlia's helmet shook slowly. "No, it doesn't. We can't perceive smells through the suit. It's a phantom sensation." She checked the reading on her tablet. Atmosphere is standard. Oxygen at 21%. Gravity is 9.81. She glanced towards the window. Visual from outside is undistorted. "Of course," I said. "We're still in the 3D section." The drone sat at the top of the staircase where it had stopped, intact. Its light blinked green and steady. Might have sounded silly, but I felt affection for it. It went in first and came back fine. The first human-made object to step in a 4D space. A hero robot. Humanity would remember it like the first man on the moon. I smiled. The staircase ended in a square hole in the ceiling. The normalcy in our footsteps' noise made cold sweat run behind my neck. Hansen swept the barrel of his rifle across the room as he approached the staircase. "Keep a tight formation." "General, there are no living entities in this structure," Dahlia said, following. "Furthermore, your weapon is about to experience some unfolding. I suggest you leave it downstairs." Hansen ignored her. His helmet pointed up, eyes locked on the top as he climbed the first step. We followed close behind, boots echoing in the narrow space. Each step felt too ordinary, and for that reason, my teeth couldn't stop chattering. We moved at a snail's pace. It took a lifetime to reach the top. When we stepped onto the second floor, none of us moved or said anything. Hansen stood with both hands at his sides and his rifle down. I watched him, trying to understand that there was indeed a second floor, that it existed, had walls and a floor and lights and windows, and that his rifle was no longer a rifle. It had unfolded, just as Dahlia and I predicted, just like our bodies would have done without the suits. In the same way a book opens, but on its own. The barrel extended, flattened, and at the same time curved into itself. The body peeled along an axis that our brains couldn't comprehend. Everything spread outwards into an arrangement of components that were still connected, but pointed everywhere and nowhere, like a schematic. Hansen dropped it and stepped back. It became a smear of its own components and settled into a tangle of metal and plastic. The thud bounced off interconnecting walls. Hansen yelled, "What the hell is that? You said it would break!" "We said it would unfold," Dahlia clarified. "That's the accurate term." "There's no reason it should do that." "Oh, there's every reason for it to do that," I said. The conversation died when we raised our gazes. The room had done the same thing the rifle did, but in a larger way. Facing me was the north wall, or what I thought was the north wall. It occupied the same space in which the floor should have been, and both surfaces were visible. Below us, no, not below, through us, the first floor was visible without a gap, but through what I called an overlap. The window was on the east wall, but also on the south wall. It showed the outside, a band of compressed images along the edge of my vision. Trees and concrete stretched and compressed like crumpled balls of paper. The nausea came back stronger when I looked around. I was about to throw up. The walls were transparent. I was viewing the first floor from an angle that shouldn't exist. Our little hero, the drone, sat there, all its internal body stretched into a glitch, its anatomy looping endlessly. "If we had walked in without these suits," Hansen muttered. "Instantaneous death," Dahlia answered. "Our topology would have attempted to recalculate to fit the 4D space," I added. "All our organs and skin and bones and veins. They would." "That's enough, Dr. Johann. I got it." Hansen walked towards the window with careful steps over a floor that intersected with the world below. He tried to communicate with his soldiers, but was met only with static noise. "Oh, we expected that," I said. "Radio waves in a 4D space propagate in a hypersphere rather than a sphere. In a folded environment, the propagation path doesn't end where the receiver is. The signal has nowhere to arrive. Think of it like trying to deliver a package to an address that exists on every road on the planet. So we're isolated." "We've always been," Dahlia said, with no worry in her voice. "We just couldn't prove it until now." The light shifted. The entire room darkened. I caught something at the edge of the window. Darkness, like a shadow moving. It crossed the mountains and the structure, and it was gone in a second. Could it have been a cloud? It made sense. The sunlight traveled inside the building, after all. "Did you see that?" Hansen asked. Gravitational glitch, probably," I answered. "With the GFA bending the space, visual artifacts are to be expected." We climbed to the third floor. It required concentration. The distortion made the distance between the steps impossible to understand. When we reached the top, my obsession peaked. The only way to describe the floor was a theorem. As we came up suddenly, there were 5 rooms, and none of them had a door, or even a wall between them and us. The corridor, walls, bathroom, the bedrooms, and the studio we'd built around the middle room, all were accessible at the same time. Their interiors folded open. The porcelain of the bathtub intersected with the mattress of the bedroom. Studio desks floated inside closets. "This is unreal," Hansen commented, spinning once. "It's real," Dahlia whispered, "and spectacular." To a 3-dimensional observer watching from outside, "We must be teleporting," I said. "If we walk to the studio, we just appear there." Dahlia crouched beside the bathroom wall, which was also every other room's wall and also the floor. I watched as her hand reached into the bedroom, moving through nothing, where the walls unfolded. She lifted a pen from the desk, and it came back to her hand, unfolding itself like everything else. Did you just grab that through the wall? Hansen said. Object retrieval across boundaries with no physical transit, she said, holding the twisting thing up. Technically, there is no wall, I said. The 5 rooms share a 3D space, so their surface distributed into the available geometry. Imagine a house drawn on paper, all flat. A 2D person living inside, the drawing must move through its doors because the walls are impassable. But for you, looking down at the page, everything can be reached without touching a single door. The walls can't stop you because you are approaching from an axis that doesn't exist for the second person. That's us, right now. We are standing above the page. I should stop asking questions, Hansen said. There was a table in the studio, which we'd put as a simulated habitation test, and from the higher dimension I could see the top and the bottom at the same time. I could see inside the drawers. Dahlia ran her measurements again. Atmosphere still standard and gravity at 9.6. Interesting. A small deviation, but not alarming. Radiation increased slightly, but still way below dangerous levels. As the general inspected the floor, attempting to pick up objects through walls, we collected data, talking and comparing numbers. And so, we heard it. First came a vibration. A frequency that our microphones caught before our ears did. It rose into a moan, deep and uneven, something that didn't fit any scale we could identify. The closest thing I could compare it to was a whale's lament, but it came from above. At the same moment, the light dropped again. This time, all the rooms darkened for several seconds, as if something was passing between the sun and us. Can visual artifacts make noise, Dr. Johann? Hansen said. We don't know, Dahlia answered, and I knew her too well to see how much those words hurt her to say. The readings are normal. Nothing spiked during that. No pressure change, no radiation anomaly. Nothing. It might be dimensional resonance, I said. In a folded space, the geometry is touching the adjacent regions. Sound might behave differently. Instead of propagating through a medium, it goes through the shape of space itself, and the shape of space here is... I gestured, unsure of what to say. I don't know. Maybe an acoustic artifact from the fold itself. From the fold? Hansen echoed. Like an echo, from the shape of the room instead of the room. The staircase to the last floor felt steeper, harder to climb. We didn't need the readings to notice the air was different, heavier, holding a certain resistance, the same way air feels before a huge storm. When the pressure drops and the body knows before the eyes see it. Our suits register the change. Gravity is at 8.8. We've lost over 10%. Dahlia held her tablet up. Radiation went up 40%. Still within safe levels, but it spiked. Pressure is down 8%. She turned to face me. Johann, this wasn't in our simulations. Is that a problem? Hansen asked. I wanted to tell him no, that everything was fine. It means the fold here is affecting more than the physical geometry, there might be let's call it a battle between the compression and the gravitational field we hadn't accounted for. Will the suits hold? They will. They can hold more than this, Dahlia confirmed. We stepped towards the windows of the 4th floor, and outside, the world had broken. It had said a huge fuck you to perspective. It took me a minute to understand what I was looking at. The soldiers down there, all of them, I could see every single one, were visible in their entirety. No, not through their clothes or skin. Through everything. Their full architecture flattened in the same space as their bodies. Muscle stretched over bones, opened like a blueprint. Their lungs pulsed with each breath, and the blood traveled through arteries across the whole body. They walked around and talked to each other, unaware we were looking at them from a dimension they couldn't see. To another person, it must have been horrifying. To me, it was the most intimate thing I'd ever seen. "My men!" Hansen yelled when he looked out. "They're fine, General," I said. "From their position, nothing changed. We're just looking at them from above the page. Remember? They only look like that from up here." Hansen stepped back and didn't look again. Dahlia took her measurements as I photographed every overlapped surface. We checked every reading and talked to each other at a speed that made it sound like a foreign language to anyone who hadn't spent a decade on this project. I laughed when she made a joke, a good one that nobody else but the two of us could get. The last staircase loomed in front of us, ending in a metal door. The roof access. In the exact position where we'd built it. And that never sparked any particular interest in me, until that moment. The air was becoming too dense, and the gravity was playing unfunny jokes, but I wanted to do it. I had to. Observe the world in full tetradimensional space. I had to see what was on the other side. "We have sufficient data," Dahlia said. "We should head back." Her face through her helmet was something I couldn't read. For the first time since we'd met in middle school. We were both doing the calculation, but not the same one. "We didn't come this far only to go back one step from the finish line," I said. "We came this far to collect data, Johann, and we have enough. We've proved the hypervolume exists. The space is too volatile. But there's more above us. That's the problem. There could be too much above us." Hansen stepped between us, facing me. "I'll say this. Whatever made that sound earlier came from up there." He pointed at the roof door. "And my opinion about sounds I can't identify is to not walk towards them." It was an artifact. We're literally bending space-time. Oddities are to be expected. "You said you didn't know what it was, Dr. Johann." "I just don't know what category it belongs to. We've spent 10 years building this door, and I'm not refusing to open it now that it stands in front of me," I said, too loudly, stepping past both of them and climbing the distorted steps 3 at a time. "This is the paradigm shift. I am documenting the roof." They rushed, trying to stop me, but I grabbed the handle and pushed the door open. I stepped out, and the sky stepped in. Literally. I stood on the roof of a hypercube, right at the top of the dimensional boundary, The sky had become an intersection of all possible skies, with every point visible as a volume instead of a surface, coming from all directions at once. Its layers curved and looped around each other, through cloud formations existing in their full 3D shape instead of a flat ceiling. The atmosphere became an ocean of fractals with impossible geometry and colors that I'd never seen. And I could see time. Echoes of snow falling upwards, crossing the light of billions of different galaxies overlapping into a singularity. This is beautiful. Dahlia gasped behind me, mesmerized. Hansen said nothing. We all looked up in awe. We spread across the roof and walked around. The data kept coming in faster than we could process it. Electromagnetic fields, pressure, gravitational waves, an atmosphere at an altitude we were and were not. And in all that, I couldn't stop talking. I must have said the words Nobel Prize 10 times. We were going to rewrite all the basic principles of physics. No, of all science. We stood where nobody had ever stood before in the history of the universe, in the hypervolume of a folded dimension, and we looked at it from above the page. The building vibrated before our suits registered it, and the light changed again. This time we could see it clearly. The entire sky darkened from every direction at once, and we all knew this wasn't how darkness worked. This wasn't how anything worked. The sound came again, longer and louder. It came from inside the vibration, from above. We looked up just as it arrived. I had no idea what I was looking at. My brain tried its best to find logic in it, but the numbers were all wrong. The world was wrong. A surface, or better, a membrane, except it was neither. As we watched, it shifted. One moment there was a sheet of glistening material that moved with the typical irregularity of a living being. The next moment, it folded out into a shape my eyes couldn't process. Not just because of its instability. That valley of pulsing red mountains slid with calcified columns like the supports of the cathedral made of flesh and bone. It materialized out of nothing, spanning miles and miles, and faded into waterfalls of black fluid. The tissue sliced into the three-dimensional space, constantly warping and folding. On Dahlia's tablet, the gravitational readings did something we never expected. It dropped, faster and faster. 3, 2, 1. Then it reached 0. What happened next was wrong. It went against every law of physics. It dropped below 0. That minus sign before the number mocked our pathetic human brains. It had to be wrong. The device had to be broken. Negative gravity? What nonsense was that? Our feet left the roof. I had no time to be surprised, but enough to anchor myself on the roof door. The gravitational pull was no longer downward. My vision twisted and slowly rotated until the sky was below me, like an endless ocean, and the roof was now a ceiling. Hansen floated in the air. Both his hands grabbed my ankle. Below him, dangling over the 40 ocean, Dahlia clung to Hansen's belt, her boots kicking the empty space. "Johann!" she cried out. "Hansen, don't let go!" I shouted. As the pull intensified, the most horrifying hypothesis came to my mind. Whatever that thing passing through the three-dimensional space was, It must have been so massive that it possessed its own gravitational field. That's when I realized what we saw was only the 3D projection of something much, much larger. Just like a cube appeared as a square on a 2D surface, showing a fraction of its real size. How massive was that thing? I had no idea how to describe it. The shape in the sky below us kept changing and moving. The darkness had become absolute, like floating in open space. It covered everything. "Pull!" Hansen said. "I am pulling." But neither of us moved, because there was nothing to move towards. The door was the only fixed point remaining. The entire building was shaking. The thing below us was still there, moving, passing, arriving and departing in every direction at once. Hansen's hand slipped from my ankle, and I managed to twist and grab him with one hand just in time. But the grip was weak. "The suits are failing," Dahlia shouted. The exoskeletons groaned and bent under the immense gravity. I'm slipping," Hansen said. I clenched my jaw so hard, tasting blood. The pull of that thing was astronomical, but this was no attack. Whatever it was, it didn't even acknowledge us. We were just ants, caught in the gravitational destruction of a passing god. 3 fingers, then 2. Hansen's hand slipped. I watched as they fell. The edges of their suits first flickered in the same way the drone had done from outside. Their bodies appeared to me in cross-section, and then in a section I had no name for. They stretched along the W-axis. "Dahlia!" I screamed. They fell into the sky, plummeting towards the endless expanse of red and white. The 3D barriers of their bodies ceased to exist. They elongated into a loop of infinite ribbons made of cross-sections of their internal structures. Their limbs stretched for hundreds of feet down the void, like falling into a black hole. Among the unfolding structures, flattening and adding more colors to the sky, I saw their eyes, massive and distorted, staring up at me, and filled with such an agony that it broke my very soul. Their screams came through the comms, and after a second, they turned into a loud, electric static. When the light returned, my vision rotated again. Gravity slammed me on the roof floor and left me lying on the concrete, with the 4D sky back above me. My shoulder broke with a sickening crack. I screamed, not from pain. I screamed until my throat burned and I choked. I dragged myself towards the stairs and rolled down. I stumbled blindly through the lower floor, crying. On the second floor, Hansen's rifle was still on the floor, unfolded. The drone continued its mapping. On the first floor, the world returned 3-dimensional. A soldier caught me when I stepped outside. I burst through the front door and ripped the helmet off my head. Then I vomited bile and blood onto the concrete. I woke up to a hospital ceiling. Radiation, they told me. I'd been exposed to massive amounts that the suit failed to protect me from. They'd never stopped questioning me about what happened, but I hadn't managed to speak a single word. The doctors looked afraid of telling me the truth. Weeks, or a few days, most likely. That's how long I have left. I'm in a bed with a window that faces the city and the sky above it. An ordinary sky. A blue two-dimensional surface. I'm tired and my hands are cold. 10 years we spent building a door to somewhere nobody could have ever reached. We proved it was there, that we could go in and come back, or that at least I could. Once. And then pay the price from beyond the grave. I know Dahlia's not dead. I want to clarify this. Her suit didn't break last time I saw her. In higher dimensions, time is just another direction one can move. She must be stretching across eternity in a moment of biological unfolding that never ends. But she's up there, and I'm going to meet her soon. Who knows? Maybe all of us are going to very soon. Because just a moment ago, a sound echoed through the glass, coming from the sky. Deep and steady, like a whale's lament. Just when the light shifted and the room darkened for a second. That shift when something passes between you and the light. It swam across the sky. I saw it, eclipsing the entire planet. A colossal section of glistening muscle and bone. Its shape changing and moving in every direction at once, bleeding from its higher dimension into ours. I'm sorry. I brought it here. I don't know when it's going to tear the sky open, but I know that the sirens won't even have time to start. I just hope I'll be gone before that. Halo 3, Half Flood, the special gift. And you're listening to Creepypasta. I'm a Halo 3 glitcher. I've done all sorts of cool glitches, like boarding the Scarab on the Storm with the anti-air Wraith. You could call me a Halo scientist. And I discovered a glitch that allowed dead enemies and allies to resurrect as the Flood, but retain their original appearance. Since I'm one of those guys who likes to investigate this kind of thing, I tested it more thoroughly. I found that they could wield any weapon that was placed nearby their dead bodies, that they could jump like the Flood combat forms usually did, although these half-Flood didn't do it that often, that they could hijack vehicles, even that crazy backflip kick elites do on guys and prowler turrets. But if they wielded the sword or hammer, they could assassinate me. I could easily tell that these weren't ordinary Flood. I understood that they were transcendent species. Oh, and they could be assassinated. You know, melee at the back, instantly dead. But the problem I was finding was that they had poor health, even on Legendary, and that the elites didn't regain their shield, whereas elite Flood combat forms can regain their shield. But what really got me interested was an apparent message on their back after I had killed them. Have you ever stopped an infection form from infecting a dead body? Ever noticed the Flood traces on its back? That's exactly what I saw on these half-Flood. I like to call them bubbles. You might call them back herpes. Harmless and uninteresting nevertheless. They were all over the back and eventually disappeared. But as I gazed intently, I'd been doing so for several months, I noted the positioning, the sequence, and even the exact sizes of the bubbles. I eventually decided to step it up a notch. I found that they seemed to spell "do it live." At first, I interpreted this to mean Xbox Live, but nothing happened when I was connected. Everything was the same. And then all of a sudden it came to my mind, the messages must have meant to do it on a living enemy or ally. Eerie. I was naive. I thought it was just an inside joke and Easter egg. I didn't find it creepy at all. So, I did some more testing. I started at exactly 12 a.m. midnight. I even got the strategy down. The strategy basically is, I trap a carrier form before going up the elevator to deactivate the third tower, release it after killing all my marine allies, get it to follow me, blow it up with a rocket launcher, get the resulting infection forms to follow me, and manipulate the enemy so that they get ambushed. And then I trigger a load point that removes all the flood from the level. But this time, when I unleashed the half-flood process on the local war chieftain, still alive at that time and also my first test subject, there was something completely different about him. First, his back was clean. No traces of flood. Second, a headshot on him, despite having his headgear on, proved fatal. Third, killing him left an entirely different message on his back. Now try elite. Another weird message. I had recently developed a morbid interest in reading creepypasta, so this wasn't very surprising. I knew that it was all fake, but something inside kept telling me to heed it. I immediately realized that I had to do it on my elite allies while they were alive. But how could I get them there without them noticing the infection and shooting at it? So I kicked the Warthog gunner out and drove off, but at a slow pace so the gunner could keep up. And when I came to the spot overlooking the brute encampment, the infection can only happen at this area, which I like to call the snow area since the ground is covered with snow. I noticed a quick texture change on the ground and sky. I shrugged it off as intentional. I had experienced something similar at this part of the level. But then the music, which had been repeatedly playing one of Bungie's oversight, died down, and the ambience began to sound like a blizzard. In fact, the snow began falling. Now this is very weird, as snowfall does not appear on the Covenant. But I dismissed this as a glitch. The game disc I was using was pre-owned. I got it from GameStop. And resumed. When I approached the brute, I was expecting a prowler to come careening into my screen, annoying the hell out of me by giving the chieftain more time to anticipate my approaching warthog. Instead, I got nothing. I got out of the warthog and walked a little further and saw the passengers and driver, total of 4, stacked neatly on top of each other where the prowler would usually spawn. Also, oddly, the chieftain and his brutes weren't even shooting at me, just standing there. It's probably that their AI was removed. But how and why? Who did it? Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of unanswered things in Halo, like the toolbox inside an intangible building on Floodgate and a plasma rifle in a dark building on Savo Highway. So I was just thinking it could be because the game disc had defects or something. Or maybe I just failed to load the loading point that would imbue these enemies with AI. I decided to take a break to grab Coca-Cola and a Burger King takeout, so I paused the game and checked my clock. A lot of time had passed. At least 20 minutes, mind you. I thought it was peculiar because this glitch usually takes 5 minutes. After retrieving the food, I came back only to find that the pause menu was transparent, and the objectives were filled with stuff about half-flood. Was I scared? Yes. So I resumed. I had to do it. I couldn't let a little paranormal shit interfere with my job, and turned around and saw that the infection forms surprisingly had their AI. But they weren't moving normally. They looked kind of glitched, very erratic even. Have you ever seen a silverfish? Their movement is similar to a fish. That's what they looked like. Really, the infection forms looked like deformed popcorn, stretched and thin. I saw one pass through a rock and another through a small tree branch. I know that they are intangible to most things, but going past these kind of scenery? I suspected something was wrong, but I was very anxious to see what an elite would look like half-infected, alive. Their behavior intrigued me, because normally they would go for the dead brutes. I had killed one or two in preparation. Instead, they went straight for the hog. I immediately readied my plasma pistol. I looked at the elite in the passenger seat. He looked back and said one thing that scared the living shit out of me. And hey, it was 2:23 a.m. when I was doing this part. How does it feel to be dead? Wait, don't answer that. If I recall correctly, elites normally said that to enemies, or to players who gave them shitty weapons. Why me? There weren't any active enemies around. I know for a fact that AI don't shoot at inactive enemy AI. I drained his shield with the plasma pistol, got him out of the hog, and blew it up, to make sure the gunner didn't shoot at the infection forms, although I don't think it was needed as he was now frozen, looking at the infection form's face grimaced with horror. It was only after I went in theater mode that I saw his eyes. They were black and beady, like Halo 1 elites, although they looked black to the core. Then I kept the passenger elite busy by doing weapon exchange with him, shooting him with a plasma pistol bolt occasionally to stop the shield from recharging. And then when the infection forms got near, I immediately ran for that loading point. I got it, and then I heard the most fucking inhuman, blood-curdling scream possible. And the weird thing is, I didn't have the volume on. I even wear a Peltor earmuff to keep me concentrate on the game. All I know is that when I turned back, I saw the elite with his mouth really open, as if someone had grabbed his jaws and pulled them apart. I also saw this creepy smile, but I don't know if it was just me going crazy. But that's not the worst of it. He was frozen, but I could see his eyes moving, and I could see his tongue abnormally sticking out. Not to mention that it was moving erratically and really fast, like those anti-air wraith gunners and when heavy grunts throw plasma grenades. I zoomed in and holy fucking shit, it was the most detailed tongue I ever saw. I compared it to mine. That's right, I paused the game, ran to the bathroom, got a small mirror, and compared mine to the elite's. It looked human. It didn't look elite at all. But did I stop? Of course not. I wasn't about to be beaten by a bunch of ghosts or whatever was manipulating my game. I am a ghost, for Christ's sake. Sliding ghost. I have researched Halo AI for months, so I unpaused it. I now regret doing it because the half-flood process had begun. The elite was writhing in pain, but I noticed some weird things coming out of his mouth. I zoomed in, Maggots. But that's not the scary part. His head started rotating rapidly, like those scary shit ghosts seen in the One Missed Call trailer. The American version. But then the animation suddenly changed. He was now looking normal, but he was clutching his head with both hands and walking aimlessly. I actually believed it was in-game animation. And then he dropped, dead, and got up. There were no visible signs of flood on him. The weapons I had given him, the sword and fuel rod gun, were clutched in both of his hands rather than the sword on his side and fuel rod gun on his back. He then turned to face me, saying the usual things he says to an ally, but in a distorted and gruffy voice. Then he started walking towards me. Was I scared at this point? No. Like I mentioned before, I had read a lot of creepypasta. I wasn't going to be scared by a thing that couldn't really hurt me. Suddenly, he leapt at me and killed me with one hit of his sword. This was on Legendary, and I'd used a modding program to give me invulnerability. At this point, I knew that something was wrong. First, sound playing, even though the volume is at 0. Now, a one-hit kill by a minor NPC? In Halo 3, the Arbiter, Johnson, Guilty Spark, Keys, they can all kill you with one shot if you turn traitor. Not even invincibility can help. Then what? I shouldn't have asked. When the game had reverted, I was facing away from the brute encampment. I thought it was over and this was like one of those legendary Pokemon encounters. But then I realized I was at the exact same spot where I turned around. The game had somehow given me a checkpoint. I turned around again out of curiosity to see if it would play out the same again, and what do I find? The half-flood elite is now holding the hammer. Believe it or not, I gave this elite 4 weapons. In Halo 3, they can carry up to 4 of them. It's a very simple strategy. But the wrong way, so that the sharp edge is facing me. In one hand, by the way. His sword was in his other hand, but it gave off a sickly red glow. Looking into it made my stomach churn, and I zoomed in and realized it wasn't glow. It was blood. The blood didn't just stream, it moved like waves. Like Lekgolo worms. I brought myself to zoom out, and the monstrosity was right in front of me. Its eyes were gray, its armor was covered in blood, which enhanced the elite major's armor's color, making it more crimson, and its feet were showing signs of decay. I immediately jumped back, charged a plasma pistol, and shot it at him. For some reason, its speed was severely reduced. The elite swung his hammer into the ground and ripped it open, and smoke immediately poured out, obscuring my view, making it difficult for me to tell if the shot landed. I could see a silhouette, so I aimed carefully and threw a plasma grenade. I could hear the stick around. I could hear the explosion. The smoke started clearing away. The elite was still standing, still alive. I spammed plasma pistol bolts at him, only to notice the recharging animation occur several times. The same amount of times that I had shot him. I could tell that the elite was invincible. What does a guy do in a horror movie when the killer's invincible? He runs. For a car, a means of escape, and that's what I did. I ran back to the Journey's End area. I looked to my motion sensor. That thing was following closely behind. To my glee, the Scorpion tank was still there, and it was operated by a Marine. I ran at full speed, and the scorpion began shooting at the thing. I thought that I would be safe if I hopped aboard. Turns out that was a big mistake. The cannon didn't do any damage to the monster, and it merely used it to bolster his leaping height. Damn marine AI. He landed on the tank, boarded it. I got out as soon as possible, but the marine wasn't so lucky, as the elite destroyed the tank with the marine within 3 seconds. Last I saw of the marine, he had this horribly disfigured look on his face when he died. His eyes were blinking. His body was distorted in death. But the scariest part was when he said, "This, and this is after dying. Chief, why did you?" The face then distorts into an elite's face. "Why didn't you set me free earlier? I was waiting for you." I was shocked. I could feel my heartbeat like never before. It was going off the charts. I started running. I had no tank, no quick means of escape. Just me and my 2 legs and some weapons. Energy sword, battle rifle, magnum, and plasma pistol. But even with all these weapons, I didn't feel safe at all. I could hear the thing breathe, and I could feel its hot breath behind me, even though my motion sensor showed it some inches from me. I kept running. I didn't bother looking back, and then it hit me. I forgot that there was a mongoose right by the scorpion. I could easily outrun the thing if I got in that. I quickly turned around, crouch jumped over the thing's sword, and dropped grenades to delay it. When I saw the mongoose in sight, I was elated, gleeful, all sorts of happy emotion flooded my mind. I looked up again, and the mongoose was gone. Shit! My only chance to escape. I turned around and immediately started running, but then one of those in-game cutscene style animations started. My weapons disappeared. I could tell I was kneeling. I was forced to look down, and I saw that my energy shield was down, my armor punctured, my intestines gushing out, a huge puddle of blood, and I was forced to look at my left hand, then my right hand, which were covered in blood. All of this in the most stunning and realistic depiction I have ever seen. And then the camera went to the third person. The thing had stabbed with me with the hammer and sword, and slowly pulled both out, and I could just feel Chief screaming. I could feel it tingling in my veins, and it was literally ringing in my head. Suddenly, the pain disappeared as the game returned to the main menu. I recall seeing it give an unusual message, but I can't remember what it said. I looked around the room, but I was overwhelmed by dizziness, but I managed to catch the time. 9:30 a.m. I passed out. When I woke up, the time was 4:25 p.m. Was it a dream? I thought. Did I really experience that? The Xbox 360 turned off because I set it to last 6 hours before auto shut down. So I turned it back on and loaded up Halo 3. I went to theater, and I saw the recent films of game saves I did the other day. Thank God. I scrolled through it for reassurance and so I could save as many films as I could, being elated at the thought of it being a nightmare. But then... oh God, not again. No, it can't be. It can't fucking be. As I came to the bottom of the recent films, The Covenant on Legendary. NANNAN 2011 000000. And the date is listed as 11/22/2005. Happiness turned into terror as I selected it. I had to watch it again. I had to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I was overwhelmed by this sudden obsession. It coerced me. When it began, I immediately pushed the start button to see if the pause menu was transparent. It wasn't. I sighed, relieved that it seemed to be fixed. So I held down fast forward, brought up the pause menu for an automatic fast forward, dismissed it and watched. Nothing unusual. The prowler was there. The brutes were active AI. The infection forms looked normal, but when it came to the part where I was going to the loading point, the film suddenly exited to the theater menu, and I got this message. Film cannot be retrieved. After that, all my attempts to load the film 100% failed. It stopped around 49%. I even checked the disc for scratches. It was in good condition, so I reinserted it. And then another message. Bungie Day themed, like on their website right now, popped up. Could it have been introduced when I installed that latest update for Xbox 360 that did nothing but pave the way for future updates? It said, Dear player, we hope you enjoyed finding our most kick-ass secret. As a reward for your testing and dedication, take this exclusive elite armor as a token of our appreciation. Love, Bungie. The Bungie text was very difficult to discern, very blurry. It seems to actually say from blunder. Now, I've looked up the definition of what that word means. It means a careless mistake. If it's the latter, was it intentional? As if to warn me of something? Why me? There's plenty of modders out there that can do shitloads more than I could ever do. How come I experience this? I am now persuaded that it was something internal, not having to do with the disc. Then the armor customization screen popped up. A few days ago, I modded my gamer score so I could get commando armor and ascetic shoulders. I wondered what was new and what could beat those badass armor pieces. I looked in the helmet. Nothing. In the shoulders. Nothing. But there it was. In the body. 6 options. I slowly scrolled through and came across another combat armor. If I selected it, the helmet would change to combat and the armor color would change to red. But the helmet was unrecognizable. It was adorned with human skulls instead of crowns, and it looked like it was just fucking smiling at me. It and its skulls. The description reads, Die to live, kill to love. I dared not go into multiplayer or Forge with it. I couldn't change it back after that, so I had to use a backup profile that I transferred to my computer a while ago to restore my armor. Was I terrified? You bet. I don't know what kind of sick, twisted psycho puts this shit into a 4-star game, but I know I'll never see Flood the same way again. They are not freaks. They are not monsters. They are not aliens. They are gods. Okay, now I am really creeped out. I don't know why I said that last bit. I was thinking of something else. Maybe, just maybe, the game had a bigger impact than I imagined. Epilogue. These are film clips I captured on subsequent exploration. Normal half-flood elite with sword and hammer. It has not been edited at all. The ending was cut off all of a sudden when I was trying to record it. It showed the half-flood elite being splattered by a ghost. Notice the thing's docility and its obvious flood AI, inept for combat. This particular half-flood was vulnerable to grenade sticks, which don't kill perfect half-floods. And before anyone suggests, kill it with fire, as you can see, it doesn't work. Not even on an imperfect half-flood. I never had the thing happen to me ever since the incident, but I know that I would rather die than see all the horrors revolving around that mysterious glitch. (7/25/2011) update. Here's a message in my email junk folder that I was planning on deleting, but at the insistence of my conscience, I'm releasing it to the public. The sender was unknown. Here's its content. Post this to the world. All 7 of them. To the 7. Hurry. I've got no time. But maybe you still do. Followed by a string of random letters and numbers. In the picture that was attached to it, missing image. HFE.PNG. Caption: the only known picture of the evil half-flood elite. Looks like 2 Marines fighting the half-flood. What did the sender mean by all this? How did he obtain a copy of the picture? Wait. Could this mean that other people received the special gift? Have you ever played 3 Leaves, 2 Branches, 1 Beak by Toast with Wi-Fi? And you're listening to Creepypasta. That was the first thing Jeremy ever said to me. I'd been babysitting the boys for 3 days while their parents were away, and until that moment he had not spoken a single word. Not to me, not to his brothers, not even to answer simple questions. The other 2 told me he was just shy. They said he had always been like that. Sweet, polite, just quiet around new people. Still, 3 full days of silence felt like something more than shyness. There were 3 of them, each about 3 years apart. Josh was the oldest, then Jonathan, and Jeremy was the youngest. He was 8, almost 9. The first couple of days were easy, almost too easy. There were no arguments, no complaints, no messes I could not handle. They played together, did their homework without being told twice, and ate everything I put in front of them. At night, they went to bed without a fight. It felt wrong, in a way I could not explain. Babysitting in the past was never that smooth. This evening, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I realized Jeremy was standing in the doorway. I had not heard him walk in, he was just there, watching me. When I turned toward him, he did not look away. He did not blink. His hands hung at his sides, and for a moment I had the strange feeling that he had been standing there for a while, waiting for me to notice him. I started to tell him something, but he spoke before I could. Have you ever played 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak? His voice was quiet and careful, like he was choosing each word before letting it out. I let out a small, nervous laugh. I had not expected his first words to be something like that. No, I said. I've never heard of it. Is it fun? His face changed instantly. He smiled wide and sudden, like he had been waiting for me to say exactly that. Yes, he said. I love this game. He looked too happy for me not to ask. How do you play? I asked. We have to go outside first, he said. Then I will tell you the rules. I glanced at the clock. It was already late, and his brothers were upstairs getting ready for bed. It is too late to go outside, I told him. You need to go to bed. For a moment, he did not react. He just stood there, staring at me with that same small smile. Please. He did not raise his voice. He did not whine or complain. He just repeated it, softer each time. Please. 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 Each word sounded thinner than the last, like it was being pulled out of him. I hesitated. I should have said no, but something about him standing there like that, after days of silence, made it hard to refuse. Is it quick? I asked. Yes, he said immediately. I let out a breath. Fine, but after that you go straight to bed. He nodded once, sharp and certain, then turned and ran. I followed him down the hall, calling after him to slow down, to at least put on shoes, but he did not listen. By the time I reached the back door, he was already outside. Barefoot, standing in the middle of the yard, not moving. The porch light flickered as I stepped out after him, and a strange stillness settled over everything. There was no wind, no insects, nothing but the sound of my own breathing. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. He did not seem impatient. He did not repeat himself. He just waited, as if the game had already started and I was the one slowing it down. So, I said, trying to keep things light. You said you would explain the rules? He nodded once. You have to find 3 leaves, he said. They have to be different. I glanced down at the ground. Leaves were everywhere. That part seemed easy enough. And 2 branches, he continued. But you cannot break them. They have to already be on the ground. Well, that makes sense, I said. Anything else? He paused, then added, a little brighter now. Every time you pick something up, you have to say what you have. Out loud? Yes. I waited for him to explain why, but he did not. He just stood there watching me, as if that was all there was to it. And the beak? I asked. You get that last, he said. at the edge. He pointed toward the back of the yard, where the grass faded into dirt and low brush before giving way to trees. "There is really going to be a beak out there?" I asked. "Yes." "From what?" "Hunters leave them." The answer came too quickly, like something memorized. I almost questioned it, but something about the way he said it made it feel pointless. "All right," I said. "I will go first." He nodded. I stepped away from him and looked down at the ground until I found a leaf that looked different enough from the others. I bent down, picked it up, and straightened again, turning it slightly in my fingers. "One leaf," I said. Jeremy nodded, watching me closely, his eyes fixed on my hand. I moved a little farther and found another, wider and darker, its edges curled inward. I picked it up and added it to the first. "2 leaves." He nodded again, just as quietly. By the time I reached the third, I was already aware of how strange it felt. Standing in the yard, talking out loud like that, repeating words that should not matter. But I could not stop. It felt important to him. "3 leaves." Jeremy gave the same small nod. His gaze did not shift. He kept watching my hands, as if he was both listening for something precise and making sure I was doing it right. "Now branches," he said. I turned toward one of the trees and spotted a thin, dry branch lying near the base. It looked like it had been there for a while. I picked it up without thinking. "1 branch?" I said. Jeremy tilted his head slightly. "All of it," he said. I frowned, adjusting my grip. "All of it?" He nodded. I let out a breath and corrected myself, forcing a small smile. 3 leaves, 1 branch." That seemed to satisfy him. I walked a few steps farther and found another branch, smaller than the first and half hidden in the grass. When I picked it up, I spoke again, a little quicker this time. 3 leaves, 2 branches." Jeremy nodded once more, slower now, as if confirming something to himself rather than to me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The quiet of the yard pressed in around us, heavier than before. Then he looked toward the woods. "Now the beak," he said. I followed his gaze. The edge of the yard did not feel like a boundary anymore, just a place where things became less clear. "You are really telling me there's going to be one just lying there?" I asked. "Yes." I hesitated, then glanced back at him. "Come with me." He shook his head. "You have to get it." "What? Can we not go together?" "I am watching." That did not feel like an answer, but he did not offer anything else. I shifted the leaves and branches in my hands and started toward the edge of the yard. The ground changed as I walked, the grass thinning into patches of dirt and uneven roots. The air felt heavier there, like the warmth from the house stopped just short of reaching it. It was quiet. Not completely silent, but quiet enough that I noticed what was missing. No insects, no movement in the trees. Just that same stillness pressing in around me. I slowed down as I reached the first line of trees. Then I saw it. It was lying in the dirt a few feet ahead of me. Small, pale, a beak. I stopped and stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There were no feathers around it, no blood, nothing to suggest anything had happened there. It looked clean, almost too clean. I glanced around, expecting to find something else. A body, bones, anything. There was nothing. Just the beak. Jeremy? I called, not taking my eyes off it. There actually is one here. I told you, he said. His voice was closer than I expected. I turned slightly and saw him standing a few steps behind me. I had not heard him walk over. I looked back down at the beak and crouched, reaching out to pick it up. It was lighter than I expected, smooth and intact, not broken or torn, just separate. For a moment, I just held it. Then I remembered. 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak, I said. My voice sounded louder than it should have. I started to straighten, turning slightly back toward the yard. Okay, that is Say it again. I froze. Jeremy's voice was right behind me now. I turned. He was closer than before, standing still, looking not at me, but at what I was holding. All of it, he said. I swallowed. 3 leaves, I said. 2 branches, 1 beak. He nodded slightly, but something in his expression did not change. Again. I stared at him. Why? You have to say it 3 times. His voice was flat now, the excitement from before completely gone. I looked down at the beak in my hand, then back at him. 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak, I said quietly. He smiled again, sudden and bright like before. Perfect. Now, one last thing. He ran back toward the middle of the yard, stopping at the spot where he had been standing earlier. Place them here, he said, almost bouncing in place. I walked back and knelt, setting everything down where he pointed. He immediately crouched beside them, moving quickly and carefully, arranging the pieces with surprising precision. He placed the 2 branches first, one flat, and the other angled against it. Then he set the beak at one end, and laid the leaves along the branches, spacing them evenly as if following a pattern he already knew. I watched him for a second, trying to make sense of it. What is it? I asked. He did not look up. A raven, he said. I frowned. How do you know what a raven is? There are not any around here. The cat scared them off years ago. He adjusted one of the leaves slightly, then finally looked up at me. That is just a story, he said. For a moment he smiled again, but it did not reach his eyes. They are still here. He glanced past me, toward the dark edge of the woods. Watching. At the time, I remember thinking it was just something he said to scare me. The kind of thing kids repeat when they want to sound like they know more than they actually do. I almost told him to stop. But before I could say anything, something moved. It was small enough that I might have missed it if I had not been looking directly at it. One of the leaves shifted. Not the way something falls or slides, but something slower, more deliberate. It lifted slightly, just enough to break the shape, then settled back into place. I froze. There was no wind. I could feel that clearly. The air was completely still, heavy in that way it gets at night when nothing is moving, when even the trees seem to be holding their breath. I kept staring at it, waiting to see if it would happen again. It didn't. For a few seconds, everything stayed exactly the same. The leaves, the branches, the beak. Just a pile of things arranged on the ground. Then I looked at Jeremy. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't even looking at the ground in front of him. His eyes were fixed just past it, on the shape itself, like he was waiting for something to happen. "Did you see that?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just smiled. Not the same way as before. Not excited. Not impatient. Quieter. Like this part of it mattered more than anything we had done before. I looked back down. For a moment, nothing changed. Then one of the branches shifted. It was only a slight movement, just enough to change the angle. But it was enough. The shape no longer looked like something we had arranged. It looked like something that was holding itself together. That was when I stepped back. I told him it was enough. That the game was over, that it was too late, and we were going inside. This time he didn't argue. He just nodded, like he already knew that was how it would end. I did not look back at it again. I closed the door behind us, locked it, and made sure he went upstairs. I'm writing this now, maybe an hour later, and I keep trying to tell myself it was nothing. That I imagined it, that there has to be some simple explanation for what I saw. But I have not gone back outside to check, and I don't think I will. Something is making sounds outside. A slow, deliberate pecking. Not on the door. Not on the walls. Part 2. I did not sleep. I stayed in my room with the door locked, listening. The sound didn't stop. It came and went, never staying long enough for me to get used to it. Never stopping long enough for me to forget it was there. Slow, deliberate. At some point, the light outside started to change. The dark shifted into something softer, and I realized it was morning. I heard the kids and went downstairs. Jeremy was already sitting at the table, eating breakfast. He did not look at me. He did not say anything. For a moment, I just stood there before sitting down across from him. He kept eating, quiet, like he had been the past 3 days. I didn't say anything either. We sat there for a few minutes without speaking. After a while, he finished, got up, and went upstairs. He didn't look at me when he passed by. I waited a bit before moving. I found Josh and Jonathan later getting ready. I stayed by the door for a second before saying anything. "Hey," I said. They both looked at me. "Does Jeremy ever go outside at night?" "Sometimes," Josh said. "Yeah," Jonathan added. "Why?" I shook my head. "I don't know. He asked me something yesterday." "What?" I hesitated. Game," I said. "Something with leaves and branches." They were quiet for a second, then Josh added, "Oh, that." "He plays that sometimes," Jonathan said. "Sometimes?" I repeated. "Every now and then," Josh said. "Only at night," Jonathan added. I nodded slightly. "Does he always ask someone else to play?" "Yeah," Josh said. "He doesn't do it himself." "What do you mean?" "He doesn't pick anything up," Jonathan said. "He just tells you what to do." "And then?" "He fixes it," Josh said. "At the end." They said it like it didn't matter, like it was just something he did. "And the stuff?" I asked. "The leaves, the branches?" "It's just there," Jonathan said. I hesitated. "Do you know where he learned it?" "Some kid showed him," Jonathan said. "What kid?" "I don't know." There was a short pause. "I think it was someone from school," Josh said. Jonathan shook his head. "No, it wasn't." They didn't say anything else after that. I didn't ask anything else either. I went outside after that. The yard looked the same as it had the day before. The grass, the dirt, the edge of the woods. I walked to the spot where Jeremy had arranged everything. There was nothing there. No leaves, no branches, no beak. I stood there for a bit, looking at the ground, expecting to notice something I had missed. There wasn't anything to notice. Not even a mark. I moved around the area, checking from different angles, like that might make something appear. It didn't. I tried to remember exactly how it had looked, where each piece had been, how close I had been standing. I knew it. I was sure I knew it. But the more I tried to picture it, the less clear it felt. Like something I had already gone over too many times. Like it had been worn down. I stayed there longer than I meant to. I stopped trying after a while. The image didn't really go away either. Even when I wasn't thinking about it directly, it was still there. That same spot in the yard. That same shape I couldn't quite put back together. Every time I got close to it, something didn't line up. Something small, but enough to notice. I sat down inside and tried again, this time slower. Just the branches first. I could see those. One against the ground, the other slightly raised. That part felt right. Then the leaves. I knew there were 3. I tried to place them, but it didn't work. I adjusted them in my head, moved them around, tried different positions. None of it felt correct. I stayed like that longer than I meant to, going over it again and again, trying to get it right. After a while, it started to feel harder to focus. Not suddenly, just a slow pressure building behind my eyes. I leaned back slightly and closed them for a moment, but the image didn't go away. If anything, it stayed clearer there. The branches. The empty space where the leaves should have been. That was when I noticed the sound. Faint at first, easy to ignore. I opened my eyes. The house was quiet. I stayed still, listening. I shifted in my seat and tried to let it go. Then it came again. A soft tap. I looked around trying to place it. It didn't come from the walls. It didn't come from the floor. I turned my head slightly. Nothing. I pressed my fingers lightly against my temple without thinking. The pressure there had changed. I kept them there for a few seconds. Then it happened again. A tap under my fingers. I pulled my hand away. The room stayed quiet. I sat there for a while, trying to think of a reason. Lack of sleep. That had to be it. I stood up, walked around, listened again, then sat back down. The sound came back. This time it didn't stop after one. Tap, pause, tap. Longer pause. Then again. Slow. Even. I stayed still, listening, trying to follow it without thinking about it. After a while, it started to feel familiar. Not the sound itself, the spacing, the pauses between each one. Like there was a pattern to it. I closed my eyes again, not on purpose this time, just to focus. Tap, pause, tap, longer pause, then again. I stayed like that, counting without meaning to, trying to match it to something. At some point I realized I had already heard it before. Not like this, but close enough. I opened my eyes. For a second I couldn't place it. Then it clicked. The way he had made me say it. Out loud. Each part separate. Each one spaced out. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. But it was already there. 3 leaves. Pause. 2 branches. Longer pause. 1 beak. I tried to stop. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't move my lips. But it didn't matter. It kept repeating, matching the sound. Tap, pause, tap. It's still happening. It hasn't stopped. I don't know if it's going to stop. I don't know if I did something wrong or if this is just part of it. I keep thinking about what Jonathan said, that he doesn't pick anything up, that he just tells you what to do, and then fixes it. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's finished, or if something's missing. I haven't gone back outside. I don't want to. I don't think I should. The sound changes sometimes. Not faster, not louder, just closer. Like it doesn't need to travel as far. I don't know how else to explain that. I keep thinking about that question, the one he asked me. The first thing he ever said. I didn't think it mattered. It feels different now. So I guess I'll ask it too. Have you ever played 3 leaves, 2 branches, 1 beak? The Girl by the Road by Terra Lava. I know this sounds cliche, but this story did not happen to me. In fact, I wouldn't have remembered it if I hadn't met with some friends a few days ago, and the road hadn't come up in conversation. The story isn't even that creepy, but knowing that someone I actually know, someone I trust, says it really happened, it makes me shiver a bit. Even her dad says it happened too. The road is a 5-mile stretch between 2 towns that neighbor my hometown. The first time I heard about it, I was coming home for Christmas. I had lived 700 miles away from my hometown for most of my adult life, and at the time, I was trying to make an effort to reconnect with my family. The only person I had spoken to for the majority of that time was my little brother. Going home to spend Christmas with my family was going to be the first time I took such a long road trip. So my little brother flew to the city I was living in, stayed with me for a few days, and then we drove back together. The idea was to take turns driving so we wouldn't have to stop too often to rest. Initially, it was supposed to be a 12-hour drive, which meant that if we left at 5 a.m., we could be there by 5 p.m. However, there was a landslide that kept pushing the ETA further back. By the time it was 10 p.m., we were still 2 towns and 60 miles away. My brother had been driving for the last 2 hours and was tired, so we stopped at a gas station, filled up, and I took over. When we passed the first town and headed for the second, he said, "Go slow here. The curves are dangerous and animals can jump in front of you out of the blue. Also, if you see someone on the side of the road trying to get you to stop, don't." Why not? It was a dumb question. It was late and picking up a hitchhiker wasn't very smart, but it felt off that he needed to say it. Then he said, very nonchalantly, "Because they're not real." I almost slammed on the brakes. He caught me so off guard. "What did you just say to me?" "What?" he replied, just as unbothered. "Everyone knows that. This road is famous for it. You know, seeing things that aren't there and people in black." "How do you not know this? I thought you liked horror." I like horror from the comfort of my own home drinking tea with headphones on. Not like this." He smiled, so I said, "You're screwing with me, right?" He cackled a little. "I'm laughing, but I'm not screwing with you. This is a real thing that happens. I've seen it a couple of times." "Nah, you're bullshitting me." "Okay, if you say so, just, don't stop if you see anything." I didn't see anything that night. We got home about 45 minutes later, and I completely forgot about it for about 2 years. A year after that trip, I moved back home. My father had kidney failure, which meant he needed a lot of care, and I didn't want something to happen to him while I was 700 miles away. 3 months after moving back, I met an amazing woman, and we started dating. Her family is originally from one of the towns connected by the road. The first town I passed through on that road trip, actually. It was while visiting one of her relatives that I heard the story for the first time. My girlfriend's cousin was celebrating her son's first birthday. There was barbecue, beer, and children running around, so a few of us sat in a far corner and began talking about nothing in particular. The conversation slowly shifted toward road trips and traveling because my girlfriend and I enjoyed a bit of adventure biking, and we talked about how annoying it is when something on the road changes your whole itinerary. I mentioned what had happened to me with the landslide, how it forced me onto the road at 10 p.m., and how my little brother told me people just knew spooky things happened there. "Oh, please, superstition," said the cousin's husband. "No, it isn't. If you travel between towns often enough, you know something's wrong," said my girlfriend's cousin. "People are gullible, man," he added. "It's real, honey. I know it firsthand," she replied. "Oh, sure, babe." "No, for real. I remember when I was like 15. And mind you, this happened at 2 p.m. with the sun blazing. I was on vacation. I was tagging along while my dad worked, and I was riding shotgun in his pickup truck. He had to make a delivery, some sound system for a party or something, and we had to drive through the road. We were approaching that big curve, about 2 miles before the gas station. You know the one? Well, when we saw this girl. She was 16 or 17 and walking along the side of the road. She was wearing a blue top and gray jeans. She looked tired, so my dad stopped next to her and asked if she needed help. She said she just needed to make a phone call and let her mom know where she was. My dad offered her his phone. She was kind of guarded at first, but seeing a young girl with him probably convinced her he wasn't a predator or something, so she asked if he could give her a lift to the gas station where her mom could pick her up. She took a sip of her beer, cleared her throat, and continued. Anyway, my dad gave her his phone. She made the call, and I could hear everything her mother was saying. "We were so worried. Where are you? Oh, we're coming to get you." Right. They sent their goodbyes. "I love you, Mom, and see you in a while." During the remaining 2 minutes it took us to get to the gas station, she was quiet and seemed to be falling asleep. She was also sweating a lot, like she'd just been dipped in a pool and had her clothes put back on afterward, which was weird because it was a really cool day. We finally got to the gas station, and my dad offered to stay with her while she waited for her parents, but she said it was okay and that she was safe now. She thanked us, and we kept driving. We made some deliveries, and when the sun began to set, we went home. At this point, she began to breathe heavily, like she was struggling to find the words to finish the story. When the 7 p.m. news started, we heard it. A 17-year-old girl who had been missing was found by her mother near a creek behind the gas station. She was wearing a blue top and gray jeans. It was her. I knew it before I even saw the picture on TV. She'd been missing for almost a day, and had been killed and dumped by that creek that morning. That means that by the time my dad and I picked her up, she had been dead for 5 hours. We all looked at each other. Some of us genuinely creeped out. Others pretending the air didn't feel heavier somehow. My girlfriend's cousin finished her story by saying, "I don't care if you believe me. This happened to me and my dad. Go ask him if you want, but it happened. I had to sleep with the lights on for weeks. Needless to say, I did ask her dad. He corroborated it, and he added that as soon as that girl got into the pickup truck, he felt unbelievably sad and cold, and he couldn't understand why. They never caught who hurt that girl. I don't travel down that road much. It's not that I'm always thinking about that story, I barely remember it now. But there's something primal about not wanting to go near that 5-mile section. I think I've gotten used to avoiding it by default, even during the day. There are ghosts in the woods, by equivalent part 6608. I don't know if you'll ever see this, but here it is. The fire had grown, roaring away. The logs and branches we had tossed inside were snapping and popping as the fire consumed them. Its warmth kept the cold at bay, melting the matted down snow around the fire pit. How long do we have to wait again? I asked, watching my hot dog roll in a slow circle on a wiener stick. My friend rolled his eyes from across the fire. 1 a.m, dude, I told you already. He took a swig from his beer bottle. Most other college students spent their time partying and trying to get girls' numbers, but not us. We were going to find a ghost, apparently. Why? You getting tired already? He asked. I was, but he wasn't getting that satisfaction from me. No, but I am getting bored. Is this all we have to do? I asked. This was the lamest ghost ritual I had ever heard of. No drawing sigils or anything. You just had to sit around in the fucking boonies with your weenie stick. My friend sighed, giving a dejected look towards the fire. Yes, she needs to see our flame. It'll be like a beacon to her. She's lost out there, somewhere. He muttered. Our professor had put the idea into his head, and now he wouldn't let it go. He had begged me to come with him. I liked to pretend I had better things to do, but it would surely spice up what would have been another weekend of smoking dope and stinking up the dorm. Now I could at least do it outside. Then what? I asked. Do we talk to her? My friend sighed, shaking his head. We take her picture, and then we get rich from it. He said matter-of-factly. I laughed. That's it? We can't talk to her or anything? Ask her about the afterlife? Or something? I waved a hand around the makeshift campsite. You didn't even bring a Ouija board or anything? Ted shook his head. I wasn't going to bring a Ouija board, dude. Bad mojo. We could get a demon to come through or something. I laughed again. What kind of ghost hunter are you? The kind that's going to get super rich. I might even let you have some of the profits. I snorted, digging into my pocket. I only had 2 joints left and would have smoked both of them myself, but today I was feeling generous. Here, I said, tossing it over. How did she die again? Drowning? Ted nodded, catching the joint as I lit mine. There's that creek that runs through here. She was super crazy back in the day, apparently. A fucking serial killer. It was the only thing I'd ever paid attention to in the old codgers class. The lady had been a settler back in the day, living in the very woods we were in. Her husband had been a trapper, selling furs for hats. The wife was a recluse, rarely showing her face to the small town Fernsworth had been. This hadn't done anything for her reputation, and people had started referring to her as what is now a proper bitch. Despite this, the husband was a kind man, and they lived happily for a time. Then, one particularly brutal winter had brought mountains of snow with it. The couple had been trapped deep in the woods in their squat cabin. This had broken the woman's mind. When the snow finally melted, some townspeople had made their way to the cabin. They had found the woman, dressed in her husband's clothes. The skin of his face had been turned into a mask, and she wore it, her eyes wild beneath it. The townspeople had tried to run, but in their panic failed to notice the traps left behind. One man had been caught in a bear trap, his legs severed in two. The other man had run into a snare trap, not designed for rabbits, but for people. He had struggled and flailed as he watched the woman approach him with a bloody hatchet. When the men had never come back, more townspeople went in their wake. They had found a grisly scene. The woman, being broken by cabin fever, had been eating the men, their limbs laying scattered on the forest floor. Upon being found, she let out a banshee-like scream and fled into the trees before plunging into a nearby stream that had swallowed her whole. They hadn't looked for the body. Now the legend claimed if you sat around a campfire in the woods, you could see her or hear her. The last of the details fizzled in my mind as I puffed away on my joint, the haze fogging my mind. Ted looked at his phone, the bright screen making his eyes squint. 15 more minutes, then it happens. I could hear the anticipation in his voice. 15 minutes passed, and nothing happened. My eyes kept trying to close, and my joint had burned down to its end. "Alright, man, we tried. Can we go now?" I asked. Ted sighed. "We got lied to, man. I feel like a fish right now." I waved my hand, not bothering to say I told you so. Instead, I kicked snow into the fire. We were walking away when Ted turned suddenly. "What?" I asked him. He stood still, hands at his sides. I felt my heart beat faster, the blood beating away the sludge of the weed. "The fuck's the matter with you?" I tugged on his arm, but he shook me off. "Sounds so beautiful," he muttered. He was fucking with me, desperate to make something of the night. I turned around and started walking away, expecting him to yell boo or something behind me. Instead, he ran into the woods. His footsteps faded into the darkness. I whirled around, watching him disappear into the shadows. "Ted? What the fuck?" I yelled. Like a coward, I froze for a good 30 seconds. Then I sprinted after him, fumbling my phone from my pocket. I swore as my cold fingers turned on the flashlight and then dropped the phone. Hurriedly picking it up from the snow, I ran in what I thought was the right direction. Ted! I shouted. Come on, dude, this isn't funny. My voice shook. Footsteps plunged further into the dark trees. I ran in their direction, slamming into the bark of a tree and down into the snow. The cold seeped in, chilling me. Quickly scrambling to my feet, I plunged further into the woods until I ran right into Ted. It was like hitting a brick wall. My head ached as I looked up. He was gone by the time I gathered myself, the void swallowing him whole. Ted, come back! I screamed. Terror shook me as I pushed through ever-deepening snow. The trees stared down at me as I passed by, their frozen limbs like crooked fingers. All of them pointed deeper into the woods. Somehow, I found Ted again. He stood at the bank of a frozen stream. The one in the story, I had no doubt in my mind. He swayed, his eyes vacant as he stared down at it. Ted, please, come back. We're lost. We could die out here, dude. I pulled on his arm to no avail. His feet were frozen to the ground. Can you hear it, Ian? He asked. I stopped tugging, only managing to shake my head. She has such a nice voice. Listen. His arm moved faster than I thought possible, grabbing me by the back of my neck. Panicking, I struggled trying to pry his fingers off me, but he had an iron grip. Let go! I screamed into his ear, beating and flailing against him, all to no avail. That was when the song seeped into my ears. There were no words, only whistling. Ted was right. It was beautiful, like the most heavenly bird song you'd ever heard. It rooted itself into my brain, and I stopped struggling. My light shone across the frozen surface on the ice. Something was moving underneath it. They were hands. So many of them. Some beckoned and some beat on the ice. My mouth was dry and my mind folded in on itself. Ted moved, his feet crossing onto the ice, dragging me with him. I fought with all my strength, scratching his hand. We moved further onto the ice, my feet dragging behind me as Ted drug me with the strength of a gorilla. The song grew in volume, growing all the more heavenly as we approached the hands moving in frenzy, knocking against the ice. Something cracked. My mind racing, I lunged up and bit Ted's neck. He jerked suddenly and let me go. Jesus Christ! He turned to me, hand clamped on his neck. Then he looked around. Where are... The ice shattered. The hands raced upwards, grabbing Ted. His mouth made an "oh," and then he was gone. I ran. Somehow, some way, making my way back through the woods back to my car. It wasn't until I had gotten back into town that I stopped. Tears made my eyes red and my hands shook. Ted's face was burned into my mind. There 1 second, gone the next. The song still plays in my head. The police questioned me to no end. I didn't tell them about the hands. They would have never believed me. Instead, I lied. Told them he ran into the woods. I had tried to stop him. Then he drowned. His death was ruled a suicide. His parents' glare told me who they blamed. That was almost 4 months ago now. Even as I sit alone in my room, I hear the whistling. It follows me everywhere. Nothing about the story said anything about whistling, and nobody said anything about how many people went missing in those woods. I don't know what telling this will accomplish, but I'm going back out there. The whistling is calling me, and I can't resist it.